Hello everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar, Hyper-V Management with Vital Signs. We'll get started in just a minute. In terms of Q&A, if you have any questions, if you can just please submit them to the chat window, and we'll do our best to answer them all at the end of the webinar. And with that, I will pass on to Stephen, who will present today's webinar.
Thanks, Rob. Well, it's definitely a pleasure to be able to present today to everyone. We're going to be showing you a new tool from Civision, which we call Hyper-V Management and Capacity Planning. We don't want to take up too much of your time, but we'd like to show you some features that we put in this tool and talk a little bit about how we see those being used to manage your private cloud and to solve some issues you might have around capacity planning and forecasting future capital expenditures. Just to motivate this presentation a little bit, I wanted to talk about a little story we posted on our blog a couple months back about the very first time that we ran this tool ourselves. So developers had put together the prototype, and we fired it up and we pointed it to the private cloud that our developers use. And what you're seeing on your screen right now is a screenshot of what we saw from one of the visualizations that the tool provides. So what we have here are 5 Hyper-V hosts. There is one small one in Ottawa, and then 4 large ones in the Netherlands. And then each of the blue boxes within represents a virtual machine. Interesting thing to note here is that the Hyper-V hosts in the Netherlands have almost or more than 50% excess capacity. This visualization is showing memory. It's a similar situation for processor and storage as well. And I'll note as well that these 4 hosts aren't on a cluster, so the memory access isn't there to allow for high availability. They're individual Hyper-V hosts. So the developers in Ottawa had known for a long time they were a little constrained with resources. But what they hadn't suspected was that the team in the Netherlands had so much available. So it was kind of a shock to them. But it was a really good illustration of what they could do with this tool. This is the very first thing that we saw as soon as we fired it up. And likely, if we had had this tool a couple of years ago, as the hosts in the Netherlands had been added and purchased, probably those purchase decisions would have been a little different. Perhaps you would have stayed with 1 or 2 hosts rather than extending to 4 with all this excess capacity. So the result of this is the team in Ottawa now has 2 new Hyper-V hosts, and I'll leave it up to your imagination as to where they came from. So without further ado, let's jump right into the demo of the product, and we'll see a little bit of what it could potentially do for you. And there's really going to be 3 components to this demo. We're going to look at what we've done in System Center Operations Manager itself, in terms of additional monitoring and operational reports around Hyper-V. Then we're going to jump into looking at the capacity planning itself, so getting an idea of what exists in your private cloud and what you're going to need in the future. And then we're going to talk a little bit as well about some of our real-time performance monitoring tools, so that if some alerts do come up, perhaps in System Center, you can jump in and take a deep dive to troubleshoot your problems. So right here we're in System Center, and I wanted to start here to really emphasize that even though we collect a lot of information that we're going to display in reports, our tool doesn't require you to add another agent to your machines, and it doesn't require yet another database. What we do is we leverage your existing installation and investment in System Center Operations Manager. And we do that through a management pack. Now, the management pack monitoring story for Hyper-V is a little confusing at best. Depending on what your environment looks like, you might want to install Microsoft's Failover Clustering Management Pack. You'd want to install the latest ServerOS Management Pack so you can monitor the cluster shared volumes. You may or may not want to install Microsoft's Hyper-V Management Pack. And then there's also Microsoft's VMM Management Pack that monitors the host as well. So in putting together our solution, we tried to simplify things a little bit. So let's just take a look here at our data center. And I have conveniently put our servers at Stonehenge. This is a a small commercial for our Live Maps product that just released lately as well, which now adds full zoomable, panable, scrollable maps of the world that you can show your IT resources on. So let's look first at the cluster. Now for monitoring the cluster, you need Microsoft's Failover Clustering Management Pack, and you also need the latest Server OS management packs to monitor the shared volumes. But even when you install both of them together, they don't actually talk to one another. So the state of the volumes that support the cluster don't roll up into the health model of the cluster itself. So again, on our blog a couple months back, we published a free management pack that anyone can download that actually takes the cluster and adds to it the state of clustered shared volumes. So now if you take this cluster, you drop it on Live Map, you drop it in a distributed application, or monitor it in some other way, when something happens to the volumes, the health state of the cluster changes as well, and the appropriate teams can come in and take action and know where the trouble actually is. We've done the same thing for the Hyper-V hosts as well, where we've added additional monitoring. Now, some of the monitors I'm going to show you duplicate what you might find or have some overlap with what's in the VMM management pack, but not all of our customers use the VMM management pack, and we wanted to simplify the monitoring story for them so they could have complete coverage without having to add these extra things that they didn't necessarily want. So the first monitor we're going to look at looks at if any of your virtual machines have been put to the paused critical state. Every so often you might find one of your Hyper-V hosts just grabs a VM, puts it into paused critical. Usually that's due to problems with your storage infrastructure. Sometimes there can be other reasons as well. But whatever the reason, as soon as that happens, everything on that virtual machine immediately stops. That includes whatever critical workflows you might have, as well as the operations manager agent that was making sure everything was running. So you're not necessarily going to get alerted that things stopped. So we've gone and added this additional monitor on the Hyper-V host so that we can look at that virtual machine from an external point of view, and we can alert when any virtual machines go into this paused critical state so you can take proactive action. We've also gone and added some performance monitors as well. So we have a monitor that tells you if the hypervisor is spending too much time on things it considers important and not so much on the workloads in your virtual machines. Usually this has to do with, again, installing Enlighten drivers and that sort of thing. Monitors for available memory as well. And I'll point out too, we do put a lot of knowledge into all the monitors that we write to help you further troubleshoot and figure out where the issues are. Put monitors in to monitor the dynamic memory pressure. So if your virtual machines are asking for more memory than you put the upper limit on for them, or that your Hyper-V host has in total. And as well, since you can't actually hear a VHD failing, we've added monitors for your virtual storage devices. So if there are any errors there, corrupted file, or something that's going wrong in the guest OS trying to communicate, you'll have an alert on that as well. Beyond monitors, we've also gone and thrown in some additional operational reports. So this first one here we think is ideal for self-service environments, where you let people come in and create their own virtual machines when they need them. Inevitably what's going to happen is you'll have people create a virtual machine, use it for a while, and then just forget to turn it off. So this report lets you get an idea of how many virtual machines are running at any point of time up here, and then you can also see the resources that those virtual machines are making use of. So it tells you if you can come in here and you've seen a spike, you might want to start looking at your environment and what you can shut down. And again, when we get into the capacity reporting, we'll see areas where you can find more information on that as well. We've also added more in-depth reports around available memory on your Hyper-V host, and again, the memory pressure, which we monitor as well. Some information about, again, we had a monitor for the hypervisor runtime. We'll show you operational data for that, as well as how much time the guests are running on the processors. Virtual storage for every VHD. We'll show you the reads and writes for that storage. You can find out here who's taking up a lot of time on your I/O systems and perhaps move the VHDs around if you have a cluster to balance out the load. We give you the throughput on your virtual switches so you can watch the network traffic. And again, for the virtual machines, we'll show at the machine level which virtual machines are using what memory and which ones have excess memory pressure that need more memory. So those are some of the operational reports we've included. We've gathered a lot more information about your hosts and virtual machines than we're showing in these operational reports. And what we do with that is we feed it into the capacity planning and management tool, which we're just going to jump into right now. So this tool is really intended to be used by people at all levels of an IT organization. We think it's appropriate from everyone from the CIO down to the daily administrators. And we've built in reports to help you carry out different tasks. So the first one we're going to look at is our assess report, which we really think of as a very high-level CIO-focused report. I first want to talk a little bit about what it is that we're reporting on in your private cloud. So if you look at the tree here, you can see that we've chosen all the Hyper-V hosts. So at one glance, we can give you an idea of how every host in your private cloud is behaving and what's turned on, what's turned off, and so on. You can also drill down and look at individual Hyper-V hosts. We're also cluster aware, so we'll show you what clusters are. You can report on the individual clusters, and you can also report on individual components of clusters. We also have something called business services. And if you use System Center Service Manager, you might be familiar with the concept of business services. Basically, groups of IT resources that have perhaps a common purpose or they're assigned to a common unit within your organization. So we let you report on those business services individually and again, the individual components of them. So back to our assess report. Like most of the reports in this tool, we break it down into areas for resources. One for memory, one for storage, and one for processor. For each resource in this report, we're going to show you what you're using. And again, this is across all the Hyper-V hosts in your private cloud. We show you what you have available, and we give you an estimate of the number of virtual machines that you could add based on your current usage. So we look at what virtual machines you have, how much memory in this case they're using, how much memory you have available, and we say, okay, you can add 10 more before you're going to run out. And we also look at the long-term trend of how you've been adding new virtual machines and how you've been using that memory, and we give you an idea of when we think you're going to run out of that resource. And again, we do the same thing for storage, and we give you the same thing for processor. Down at the bottom here, you'll again note the business services that we're listing. And here we're really showing you what fraction of resources that you've purchased each business service has available to it. So while it's not a complete chargeback report, it does give you sort of an idea of how you've allocated resources to the different business services. And again, we think this is a great report, one, for looking to see what you have, but also for using at budget time when you want to ask the CIO for some extra money because you say, we're going to run out of memory. Can we have additional funds to beef up our Hyper-V hosts? More often than not, the response you're going to be is, no, you can't have more money. Can you do more with what you have? And for that, we've built in an optimized report. Again, we've broken it down into 3 sections: memory, storage, and processor. And we're showing you where we think that you could reclaim resources. So for example, under memory, we have the top idle virtual machines. These are virtual machines that are making use of dynamic memory, but the minimum amount of dynamic memory you've assigned to them is more than the machine is actually asking. So for the top virtual machine here, you've assigned a minimum of 3.2 gigabytes, but it's asking for 2.6. If you were to go into Hyper-V Manager or VMM and tweak the settings for that virtual machine, you could then free up some more memory. Same thing for storage. We show you the top inactive virtual machines. So these are the virtual machines that have been turned off for the longest amount of time and potentially aren't being used anymore. So we'll show you the amount of storage that you could reclaim from each of those virtual machines if you simply deleted the VHDs that they're using. On the processor front, we'll show you the virtual machines that are using the smallest amount of processor. Again, these are candidates, so you might want to take the workloads on these machines and consolidate them on other virtual machines. Or you might find that the machine actually isn't doing anything at all, and again, it's a candidate to be powered off and turned, or even deleted. Now, not every environment is running with idle resources, so we also do some optimization around stressed resources as well. So we'll show you the top stressed virtual machines under memory. Again, those where your upper limit on dynamic memory are more than or less than what's being demanded. We'll show you the clustered shared volumes and how much storage is being used on each of them, as well as how much is available. And you'll notice, well, we also tell you when you're going to run out on a not only overall basis, but per cluster shared volume. And we'll also show you which hosts are making use of each cluster shared volume. In top stress virtual machines, we'll show you where the CPU is highest. Hosts, we'll show you same thing, processor usage on the hosts. And we'll also show you the memory usage on the host, and again, on a per host basis, when we think you'll deplete memory. And we think these stress reports are a great opportunity to sort of rebalance your private cloud. Find the hosts that are under the most stress, and then move some of those virtual machines to other hosts so that the workload across all of your Hyper-V hosts is balanced. Once you get to that point in time, how do you keep it there going forward? Well, for that we provide you with a provision report. We think this is a nice report to look at when you want to add a new virtual machine. We actually use it in our own development environment when we're looking at where we're going to place new virtual machines to find out where there are the resources, because it's a great dashboard at one glance to find out where do I have the memory, where do I have the storage, where do I have the processor for this additional virtual machine. So again, for memory for each host, we show you the ones that are available or how much they have available. We show you how many virtual machines we think you can place on that host before you exhaust the resource. Same thing, we do local storage on the host. We also do the cluster shared storage. And the same thing for processor. So again, great resource to figure out where you can put things. If you want to take a deeper dive and say I'm thinking of putting a virtual machine on this host but I want some more information about it, I can click through into our real-time performance dashboards. And the page I'm looking right now is an in-depth look at the storage that Hyper-V host is using. So I have a list of the cluster shared volumes that host is making use of. And then graphically I can see each virtual machine and the storage that those virtual machines are using, where it is, which volume in particular, and I can also look for a particular virtual machine. What are the files? Do I have a lot of snapshots of my VHDs? Do I have a lot of saved memory states? And how big are each of those files? You can also come across and look at a dashboard for the performance of the virtual machines as well. So for example, we're looking at our Exchange 2010 host or virtual machine right here. And we can look at actual real-time performance metrics. We have a number under processor, memory, disk, and so on. So under memory, I can see that the memory demand that virtual machine is by the amount it's currently using, as well as the pressure it's exerting on the Hyper-V host. And I'll mention as well that while this is real-time data, and we're actually sampling every 15 seconds right now, we can also look back in time and grab historical information about the processor or the memory and so on, because we collect that information in System Center Operations Manager. So when you start up a real-time performance dashboard, we not only start sampling from now into the future, We also grab historical information from Operations Manager and marry the two. That gives you a good idea of the historical picture, so you can know is the behavior now out of the norm or within normal parameters. We do the same thing for the Hyper-V host as well. We collect a whole whack of information on a real-time basis, again sampling every 15 seconds. And we also again grab the historical information from Operations Manager and display it as well. We'll also flag as well any metrics that we think are out of spec, so that, for example, you can do end-to-end troubleshooting if you start in Hyper-V, or if you start in System Center Operations Manager with an alert, something's gone wrong. You can jump into this real-time performance dashboard. We'll flag with orange for warning, red for errors, to let you drill down into sections of real-time performance that are having problems, and we'll tell you the metrics that are out of spec right now. And for each metric, you can configure thresholds as well that you want to use, or you can actually use our calibration that lets you sample over time, where presumably the machine is operating normally, to see what the normal ranges are for that metric. And then when you turn on the real-time performance troubleshooting, we'll compare current performance to how you calibrate it to tell you where issues are. So that's a little bit about this new tool we've put together around Hyper-V Management Capacity Planning. Again, we've tried to make it full circle story that you can go from System Center Operations Manager, where we've added these additional monitors and additional operational reports. When you do get issues flagged, you can jump into the real-time performance dashboard. And then on an ongoing basis, you can use the long-term reports to look at the current state of your private cloud, to look at where we think you're going to be in the future, and use it for a budgeting process when you're going to have to add additional resources. So, really like to thank you for your attention during this demonstration. We're more than happy to take any questions you might have about this new product or Civision in general. I think you have the little chat window for Q&A if you want to enter anything there, and then Rob will just relay them over.
Thanks, Stephen. I don't see any questions in the chat window yet, but I'll just give a few more minutes. If you want to enter anything in the chat window, we'll answer them now. Otherwise, you can pass your questions along to sales@civision.com, and we'll be sure to answer you through that medium as well.